I get up first thing in the morning. What I'm hoping for is to be happy, to live a high quality of life, to enjoy prosperity today, and also have the confidence that I can look forward to a prosperous future for me, for my kids, for you, for all of us. Isn't that something we all want? Of course it is. That's a dream that everybody in the world shares. I'm Barry Wilson. I'm a systems ecologist, and I stand at the intersection of three big systems: people, the environment, and economies. And I've learned that these systems, they can produce the elements that are necessary for happiness, prosperity, and living a very high quality of life. I've also learned that the cumulative effects of all of these systems interacting, and actually the synergy of their parts, that's a world that we experience every day. And that can lead us to good outcomes or bad outcomes. I've also come to realize that humans have a very important role in determining if those are going to be good or bad. Really what all this boils down to is connection. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to imagine for a minute a world where people are firmly connected to their dreams. Imagine a world where we are connected to our past and creating our future. Imagine if through that connection of time, we could actually connect generations together. Imagine the power of that. Imagine a world where cultures, races, organizations, nations, they're all connected, working towards a collective good. But even better than that, through their work together, they're actually creating opportunities and prosperity for individuals. Imagine what that world would be like. Imagine if there were no negative unintended consequences. Imagine if we didn't waste money and time and energy just trying to mitigate or minimize our footprint. Imagine if we were in harmony instead with the planet. Imagine a world where we didn't miss out on economic opportunity because of conflict, protest, delays. Imagine a world where we understand the connection of the environment, people, and economies, and that we can achieve prosperity by caring for the earth. Imagine how great that world would be. That's what I want. It's all connection, and I stand for connection because connection is the secret ingredient to success. So that's why I created this live show, to give us an opportunity to connect together. Both you and I, but also this huge community of citizens of the world who share the same interest in the things that you and I want. So that's why I created this show, CFX, the connection of things. Let's get it started. All right, so pretty awesome tech, hey? I created this show live so we could connect, and that's why I put it on the YouTube platform, because millions and millions of people are there. We all know how to use it, and you can interact directly with me and in the future with the guests that I have on this show using the chat window. So please don't be shy about putting in your comments in there. I want to hear from you. And if you don't have the opportunity to see the show live, you can just leave your comments below the video. Now, I sort of painted a picture of a world that we'd all love to have, but it's not quite like that, is it? Just imagine how many millions of dollars, how many jobs we've missed out on because we're in a situation of conflict over land or marine use. It's every day in the news. We see it all the time. It's actually dividing communities. It divides nations. Pipelines are a perfect example of where a lot of this conflict is coming together. And, pipelines can be good or bad. They can have positive outcomes or negative ones, or sometimes a combination of that. But what is happening typically, and has been happening, that's causing the delay, is that those individual projects are getting isolated from everything else in the world. And so that we get this focus, this disconnected focus of looking individually at a single project and not understanding then the broader scope of effects or connections that project has to a lot of other values, to other people, to our environment, to our economy. So if we can understand that better, we're going to be able to move in a positive direction easier. I think of another example where we're disconnecting all of the parts of a system. I think about the life cycle of salmon. Salmon start up high in a watershed and make their way down rivers, and they go out into the ocean for a few years, and they come back and lay their eggs. It takes 3 to 7 years, depending on the species, to complete and fulfill that life cycle. And along the way, they interact with so many different human land uses, natural disturbances. Now they're even being impacted by climate change, especially through water temperature, either in the ocean or in our rivers and creeks. So, and the salmon are this amazing example of the holistic connection of everything, because we often think as people, at least I always did, that salmon are a water species. But the reality is they are actually very, very connected to the land, to all of the creatures on the land that they sustain, and not just bears and eagles and other things that are eating their bodies. But when they drag those carcasses up into the forest and they decay in the forest, all of those nutrients go in and feed the forest. In fact, there's a lot of studies going on now that are showing the nitrogen content in forests along many of these salmon producing streams. Upwards of 70% of that nitrogen came from salmon. And they also then, all of the decaying components of their body when they spawn, it goes down, it's flushed down a river into lakes, feeds all the other animals that eventually become food again and nutrients for the young salmon before they head to the ocean. So it's the perfect example of the interconnectedness of all of these things, bigger than what we normally think of. And so, there's a term out there for this, and it's called cumulative effects. Now, cumulative effects, that's a 6-syllable word, and it's a bit of a mouthful. So I've really gone towards this acronym of CFX. 3 syllables, a lot easier. CFX rolls off your tongue really easy. So that's why I called the show CFX, the connection of things. It's really standing for cumulative effects. Okay. When I was 10 years old, my mom and I would go to these roadside streams and little ponds. Do you remember those? And we'd take like a jar and scoop that jar into this pond that looked like nothing. Like it had a little bit of scum on the top, and it just looked like nothing. And then you'd hold it up and look inside, and wow, amazing diversity, right? There's tadpoles and mosquito larvae and water boatman bugs and a whole bunch of things that I didn't even know what they were. And I'd bring those home and look at them under the microscope, and it really drove home for me that, what appears to be nothing on the surface, oftentimes when you look below the surface into something, you find out the complexity is something far greater that you never expected. That's what cumulative effects are like. And, as a systems ecologist, I love to explore like that, exploring through science, but also I'm a professional forester, so I spend a lot of time bushwhacking out in the bush, and I can tell when you're off trail. Anybody that bushwhacks, that's where the best stuff is. It's that exploration, that willingness to go and look, and that's kind of what this show is also about. It's going to be an exploration of connections. Because the greater our awareness is of those things, the more capable we're going to be collectively of creating better outcomes. Today's show is an intro. It's just an intro to this long series that I'm really looking forward to. And in my future shows, I'm going to be interviewing guests from around the world. And we'll be talking about their expertise in connection, cumulative effects, whether that's in geopolitics or it's traditional indigenous knowledge, economics, hardcore botany and biology. Going to be a whole range of things. You're going to find it really interesting. Today, what I wanted to do was just sort of give a perspective of that idea and the why on creating it. Now, just a quick note on CFX, because it's not a common term for everybody, but for those of us who work in the business, especially of impact assessment, it's been a common term. And that terminology has kind of been embedded in our minds through existing legislation definitions. So all the way back to the 70s, really, cumulative effects have been a part of environmental impact assessments, and they've really had a focus, a term of looking at or identifying cumulative effects or CFX as the negative consequences of a potential project we're looking at that we can't mitigate. In other words, the pain that we have to live with. But just think about that. Think about, just looking at the negative. It really doesn't tell the whole story, does it? But if I just look back, at the evolution of the definitions, because this brings with it a little bit of baggage, and I'm hoping through this show that we're going to sort of break that down, and we're going to see cumulative effects in a different light. We're going to see that they're both positive and negative outcomes, and understanding those systems connections is going to be very powerful. So back in 1978, the U.S. Council on Environmental Quality, and yes, I'm using notes because I can't remember all of this stuff, first came out with a definition. It's one of the earliest ones that I can find in the literature, where it talked about cumulative impact as the impact on the environment which results from the incremental impact of the action when added to other past, present, and reasonably foreseeable future actions, regardless of what federal agency or person undertakes such other actions. Cumulative impacts can result from individually minor but collectively significant actions taking place over a period of time. So that's a huge definition. But really what they're looking at is the impact on the environment, and they weren't thinking about a positive impact, they were thinking about a negative impact. In 2012, there was a significant shift starting to happen in how we were thinking about that, and a new definition came out in Canada under the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act 2012. But it still had a real big focus on the environmental component. So it said in that act that we must take into account, among other factors, the environmental effects of a designated project, including the environmental effects of malfunctions or accidents that may occur in connection with the designated project, and any cumulative environmental effects that are likely to result from the designated project in combination with other physical activities that have or will be carried out. Again, very long, kind of clunky, difficult definition, but really focused on environmental malfunctions, the negative consequences of a project. Okay, but cumulative effects are really just the outcomes of interacting systems, of economies, people, and the environment. That's really what they are. They could be good or they could be bad. It's more than just the environment, right? We need a bigger holistic approach to this. This is actually founded, this holistic idea and concept of this connection. You will find it embedded in indigenous traditional knowledge going back a long, long time. And it just seems like we've sort of departed from that in impact assessments, at least. So to me, it was still an inadequate definition because it's not how systems work. It's not that holistic perspective. It's not the real world that we live in. Just isolating the parts from everything else, disconnecting them. Okay? So in 2019, Canada, where I work as a practitioner, came out with the Impact Assessment Act, and it really challenged the status quo and provided a new definition that's getting a lot better. Effects means unless the context requires otherwise, changes to the environment or to health, social or economic conditions, and the positive and negative consequences of these changes. So really starting to look at a holistic triple bottom line definition, and understanding that there are positive and negative consequences. So I see that as a real improvement. But you know what? I like simple. And so this is my definition, and I wanted to share this with you because I needed to show you that there's all this complexity, and if you Google it, you will see all of this other stuff. But here's how I kind of think of cumulative effects, my simple definition. Cumulative effects are the positive and negative changes caused by the interaction of those three systems, people, the environment, and economy, over meaningful time and space. And that meaningful time and space is going to be a critical element we're going to explore in some future shows. But I think that's a lot simpler. It's the positive and negative changes that come from the interaction of those systems, and it's occurring over time and space that's meaningful to us. All right, I'm going to sprinkle this show with a few different segments to keep it interesting so it doesn't become this big technical boring thing. So today I'm going to start with one I'm calling A Forest of Whispering Speakers. These are big headphones, gotta say. I've been looking for some good earbuds, but I will say, they're good Sony speakers, and the sound is really great. So I kind of look like a radio show host here. I'd like to get something a little less conspicuous, but nonetheless. So if you're like me, you like lyrics, and you find meaning in them. And I've really gotten into this in the latter part of my life. I'll admit, when I was younger, I was really just about the tune and the lick and how that sounded. And half the songs that I loved, I didn't even know what the words were. But I've gotten to looking into what the artist is really conveying. And one of my favorite bands, if you know me, you know that this is the Tragically Hip. Tragically Hip is an epic Canadian rock band. Not so well known around the world as they are in Canada. In Canada, they're icons. And the leading man in the Tragically Hip's Gord Downie, the late great Gord Downie, whom I have forever grateful for all of the knowledge and fun that he has shared with us through his music. He's an amazing writer, an amazing poet. And so Gord actually inspired me to do this section, and that's why I'm calling it A Forest of Whispering Speakers. That little gem of a line comes out of one of his songs, and that is for a good life, you just might have to weaken. the Tragically Hip, and that was on the Violet Light album that came out in 2002. And it's actually based on a graphic novel that was released by another Canadian artist, I believe in 1996, cartoonist Seth. You can look that up. Anyways, A Forest of Whispering Speakers really speaks to me because I've learned that as I dig into cumulative effects, the CFX, I've learned that being able to adapt to change, and change is constant and pervasive. Really, we can do it a lot better if we seek out a range of perspectives, if we collaborate among different people, groups, ideas. You bring a bunch of minds together, you get a better idea than you can think of on your own. And this forest of whispering speakers speaking to us sort of conveyed that to me. And it also conveys to me, if you listen to the song, it's like the forest is communicating with us, and that's connection. And if we listen to Mother Earth and we listen to the elements of it, we'll see that there's a lot of knowledge to be shared with us, things that we can learn. So a forest of whispering speakers, all of us. I would play this YouTube video, but I'll be completely honest, I'm a little bit afraid that I'm going to get some kind of copyright violation and YouTube's going to tear down my show. So I got to figure out how I can do that. But for the meantime, I'll just encourage you. You can go, I put this up here, the Tragically Hip YouTube channel. You can go there and you can listen to the song. You absolutely should do it. Let's pull a few more lines from the song. For a good life, we just might have to weaken and find somewhere to go. Go somewhere we're needed. Find somewhere to grow. Grow somewhere we're needed. And for me, this really says this whole idea that we need to be able to move beyond business as usual. This situation that we're stuck in where prosperity often seems locked up because we're in conflict, and it's because we're working with pieces and parts of interacting systems instead of looking at the full system. So in order to find that solution, we're going to have to grow out of our perspective. Just like those definitions have evolved over time of CFX, we're going to have to continue to grow and find a better way. That's how we're going to get a good life. We're going to have to weaken a little bit on our own biases, our own perspectives perhaps, and invite some others in. One more line I want to pull from that song. He says, a forest of whispering speakers. Let's swear that we will get with the times in a current health to stay. Let's get friendship right. Get life day to day. And to me, this is really connection. Gord was speaking to this idea of not having, just token consultation or unmeaningful, uncaring conversations, but rather connecting in a meaningful way. A lot of times what I see in my work, looking at environmental assessments or project reviews or land use planning, there's a whole list of tick boxes, and there's things like, consultation and stakeholder feedback received, and we're ticking off all of these boxes, and then we carry on with what we were going to do anyways. And that's extremely frustrating. That drives a lot of conflict and mistrust. It breaks down relationships. So instead, if we sort of step back and we say, hey, let's get friendship right. Let's get life day to day. Let's get with the times. Let's listen to the forest of whispering speakers. I think that was the message there. Go listen to that song. I think you're going to really, really love it. Okay. I'm just going to move into the second section. In the future, when we're doing interviews, we're going to have some really exciting segments where we're engaging actively with somebody else, so you won't be just listening to me. So that'll be a lot better. And we're going to have the CFX library component, rapid fire questions. So I'm really looking forward to that. So I'm just going to take us into the second and last section of today's first show of CFX, the connection of things. And I want to share some ideas about big system thinking and what this everything is connected idea means to me. And I want to hear from you. I'd like to hear what your perspective is on this. See if this idea resonates with you. And let's get a conversation going here. Let's bring together the forest of whispering speakers to talk about this. To help me here, I'm just going to pull up a few images to help me sort of describe where my train of thought is going, so you're not just listening to the words. I think about back to what I was talking about right at the beginning, about imagining a world that we want to live in. And for me, it really comes down to unlocking the prosperity that seems to be locked down right now, releasing our full potential, if you will, and doing that while caring for the earth, because that's actually where the secret to sustainability and prosperity is going to be long term. So if we get out of this short term mindset and we want to create something for the long term, that's where it's going to be. And here's how I see it. A lot of times if you were to look up sustainability, you'll see a Venn diagram like this with 3 independent circles. Those 3 systems that I said I was standing at the intersection of: people, economy, and environment. And in the literature, these circles have been shown to sort of overlap a little bit. What that says to me when I look at that is that, okay, there's this little triangle in the middle where they overlap, right? That's sustainability, and that's our little target, which seems like a small area and it's probably really hard to achieve. But it also tells me, even more importantly, that these systems are independent. And somehow we're supposed to do some magic and pull them together and make them overlap and then live inside that little triangle. That seems pretty hard. And fundamentally, we know that people and the environment are connected, and the environment and the economy are connected, and all 3 are connected. They can't exist independently. So this, right from the get-go, this idea of 3 independent systems somehow merging magically is how we're going to create sustainability. I just think it's the wrong way to look at the system. I don't think that's how the system actually operates. So I've got a different way of looking. I started thinking about this and thinking, well, it's really a dependent relationship. And I often say that everything is connected and the order matters. And this is what I mean, is that really the environment nourishes people, and people create economies. Okay, and it goes in that order. That's actually the natural laws. And if you don't believe that the environment nourishes people, try going without air or water. You can't. You absolutely can't. You could go without $5 in your pocket, but you can't go without air, water, food. The environment is what provides the elements necessary for our life. It nourishes us as people. And then we as people, we actually have choices about how we create economies. Economies are just the efficient use of resources, how we allocate our time, energy, and raw resources to improve our quality of life. And we can do it in many different ways. We can do it in consumptive ways, or we can do it in regenerative ways, and we have choices. But it goes in that order. I think a lot of times you see it on the news, you see it in politics, this notion that we are nourished by the economy. It's not true. The economy is just an efficient use of resources to improve our quality of life, and we have choices over it. It's not actually the thing that nourishes us, the environment does. So there's this dependent relationship. And another important aspect of this, as an ecologist, I understand that the resources of the environment are finite. They're not ever expanding. So we have this finite, fixed amount of environmental resources that nourish people, and people create economies to improve their quality of life. It's a dependent relationship, and the more I think about it, I think, well, geez, it's circles all overlapping, kind of like that's what the Earth is, right? So I take that a little bit farther and say, okay, now how I'm a modeler, how could I represent this in a little bit of an abstract way that maybe helps us understand it better? Well, okay, so I'll just take this sphere of the Earth and I'll change it to a green sphere called the environment, wrapping all around the outside, like I was showing you in those circles. Okay, so there it is. There's the environment. And then if we cut it open, we would see the dependent relationship of those circles inside. The environment nourishing people, and people creating the economy. Now what's interesting is that human population is growing, right? It's been growing for a long time. This graph comes from United Nations forecasts. There are one or two forecasts that look at it possibly leveling out, but the vast majority of forecasts for the future is that the human population is going to increase. So I represented that in this model where you see the blue ring expanding. Okay, so it's expanding, but remember that the Earth is finite, so it's not expanding. So you actually see the increasing human populations actually over the environment word. I did that on purpose because it's sort of increasing and overlapping while the other is continuing to stay the same. And as population increases, there's more of us. We need more economy to provide us with the goods and services that we demand. So our economy grows. So you can see, we've gone from this initial state of a relationship that we were in for thousands and thousands of years, and especially now as our population continues to grow. The blue ring is increasing, and in order to provide goods and services for that blue ring, the economic core has to grow as well. But the environment isn't increasing. And this is why we're starting to feel like we're running out of room. And it continues, this dynamic actually continues. This is another chart that this is showing the per capita rates of consumption in the developing world. A lot of the developing world is moving into developed status. And when they do that, they want the same level of goods and services and stuff that we have. And so their rates of consumption are increasing. So now we have increasing population driving the need for more goods and services, and an ever increasing rate of consumption by those people. We're running out of room. This is not sustainable, right? It's not sustainable. So what's the answer? Is the answer to give everything up and not have anything, go live off the land and give up all of our technology and all of our high quality of life? No, it's not that. We just need to think about the system's dynamics, understand how the system is connected. And if we do that, we can actually imagine the future that we want and start to reverse engineer the steps needed to get there. And then that will guide our choices today. So that's why I sort of created this model. And so I see the potential future as being one more like this, where the environment is nourishing people. People are nourishing the economy, or choosing an economy that provides goods and services that they need. They might be nourishing the economy. But that we choose economies that regenerate our natural capital while providing us with those goods and services. Okay? So I think that's where the future rests, is not just having this ever-expanding core that eventually is going to run out. We need to shift our mindset on this connection and start to modify and enhance our economies, move them to, I would say, a higher level, a more advanced level of economy that regenerates the system, the environment that's nourishing us. All right. We'll turn that off. I would love to hear what you think about that. I know that there's a lot of effort going on right now exploring how we're going to move forward, how we can still continue to have prosperity while caring for the earth. And we're going to be exploring that through this show a lot. Turn that off. Still getting used to my technology here. I guess I just wanted to move now to wrap the show for today and look forward to next week. Next week, Mark Cliff Phillips, who's the executive director of the Mackenzie Valley Review Board, is going to be meeting with me, and that's going to be a lively and engaging show. You won't be just having to listen to me, so that's going to be, I think it's going to probably be a lot better. But I really felt like I needed to set the stage for today so that for people like me who like to start at the beginning and work their way through the system, they're going to know how this show originated. And one day, sometime in the future, I'll be able to look back and laugh at myself at, all of my crazy stuff. I wanted to also just, I guess, roll this up in something that a coach of mine, Jeffrey Bornman, has really brought home for me in work that I've been doing with him in the last year, that will help change your perspective and understand how these connections can really be working for you instead of what sometimes feels like against us. And that is to be able to take gratitude. So I just want to take a moment to say thank you. In the words of the Scotsman people whose territory I live in, Cookschetchum, to all of the people who have been helping me get to the point where I am today. People that have shared their knowledge, their wisdom, people that have reached out and connected to me and been willing to share their answers, their perspectives, their ideas, and grow. And that's what I'm really looking forward to in this show, is being able to do that with you. So I'm also very grateful for you, the audience, who's going to be making this show really what it is through our live engagement. So every week at 11 a.m., I'm going to be streaming live here on YouTube. I look forward to seeing you there. I more than look forward. I need your help with this. I need you to connect and engage and help us build this community so that we can create the life we want and not just be stuck with business as usual. All right, till next Friday. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you then.